The slap came fast. Soup without salt, that was enough. Hi, my name is Harper Dunn. I'm 24 years old. I've been their scapegoat, their maid, their burden. Cover that bruise, my father hissed, breath sour with whiskey. Or you'll be out of this house. I nodded, silent. But inside, something finally cracked. 1 week later, his mask shattered, in front of everyone. Have you ever faced betrayal like this? Share your story in the comments. This is where it all begins. The morning after, I stood before the mirror. My cheek ached, purple blooming under cheap concealer. Each dab felt like erasing myself, not just the bruise, but the years of silence. In the kitchen, I cracked eggs into a pan. The sizzle filled the air, but not the void inside me. Dad stormed in, tie crooked, phone in hand. His eyes scanned me like property, not his daughter. Hurry up, he snapped. And don't ruin breakfast like you ruined dinner. I bit my lip, nodding like a servant. I felt like a ghost, trapped in my own house. 6 months ago, I lost my job in Columbus. The firm downsized. I was expendable. With no savings, no options, I came back home. I thought family meant refuge. Instead, it became prison. Dad seized my bank account for my own good. $50 a week, enough for gas, not for freedom. Mom wasn't better. Barbara Dunn, the social queen. Her weapon wasn't fists, but words sharpened like knives. Useless, she sneered when I spilled coffee grounds. Can't even handle chores. No wonder no one wants you. Her smirk hurt worse than Dad's slap. Because it said, I don't see you at all. That morning I plated eggs, hands trembling. Set the table properly, Dad barked. No mistakes this time. My throat burned with swallowed words. I was their cook, their cleaner, their scapegoat. I dreamed of escape, but fear chained me down. Until one call cracked everything wide open. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, my voice low, careful. Chelsea Dunn? The man asked, professional but urgent. This is Stephen Hayes, trust manager for your grandfather's estate. My heart jolted. Yes, this is Harper. We need to meet today, Stephen said. It's serious. What's wrong? I whispered, glancing at Mom nearby. Unauthorized withdrawals, large ones, in your name. The words sank like ice. Unauthorized, in my name. My account was locked. Dad made sure of it. I'll try, I said, forcing my voice steady. Don't try, Stephen warned. Come, or you could be implicated. I hung up, pulse racing, the kitchen spinning. Barbara's eyes narrowed. Who was that? Just a friend, I lied, slipping the phone away. But the truth was burning in my chest. For the first time, fear turned into fire. Something was happening with my money, my life. And this time I wasn't going to stay silent. Noon arrived. The table gleamed with polished silver, crystal glasses catching the light. I moved quietly, placing plates as Barbara supervised with eagle eyes. Straighten the napkins, she hissed. Do it right for once. The doorbell rang. My stomach lurched. I wiped my palms on my dress and opened the door. 2 of Barbara's friends swept in, perfume thick, smiles sharper. Behind them stood Jonathan Price. Jonathan, my college friend. The boy who once stayed up with me until dawn. His grin faded when his eyes found my cheek. The concealer hadn't hidden everything. Chelsea, he said softly, slipping past the women. No one had called me that in years. I forced a smile. Jonathan, it's been a while. He studied me, but nodded politely. Barbara welcomed them, laughter practiced, voice smooth as glass. She fussed over flowers while I poured iced tea. Jonathan leaned closer, voice low. You okay? You don't look fine. My throat tightened. My hands trembled on the pitcher. I'm fine, I whispered. But the word cracked. He touched my arm lightly. You're not fine, he murmured. What's going on? I blinked hard, swallowing tears, before Dad's voice thundered. The front door slammed. Edward strode in, tossing his jacket onto a chair. Traffic, his eternal excuse. His eyes snapped to me, sharp and assessing. Why are you standing there? Serve the food. I flinched, nodding, grabbing trays from the kitchen. Jonathan followed, pretending to help with plates. Chelsea, he whispered urgently. That bruise, it's not nothing, talk to me. My pulse raced, words tangled on my tongue. Not now, I hissed, glancing toward the dining room. Jonathan's jaw clenched. His eyes didn't waver. I'll call you tonight, he said. We're not done. Back at the table, Dad demanded wine. Barbara laughed too loudly at Linda's story. I kept pouring, kept moving, but inside I shook. Jonathan had seen through the facade. For the first time, someone noticed. And that call from Stephen still burned in my mind. As guests complimented the food, I smiled mechanically. But every second I felt Jonathan's eyes on me. Not judgment, not pity, Just concern. Real concern. And it cracked something wide open. The mask I had worn for years began to slip. They thought I was too weak to fight. But weakness was giving way to something else. A spark, a choice, a way out. Dad called me to the living room. A paper waited on the table. Sign, he said, voice flat as steel. Family loan. Clears the misunderstanding. My stomach turned. Not a misunderstanding. Theft. In my name. Barbara folded her arms. Pearls bright, eyes brighter. Don't be stupid, Harper. Sign and move on. I lifted the page. My hands were steady. The fear wasn't. It was shrinking. You took $75,000, I said. From my trust. Under my signature. Dad's jaw flexed. Eyes dared me. You're delusional. Stop the drama. He nudged a pen across the wood. Sign or you're out tonight. Old reflexes twitched in my bones. Obey. Apologize. Disappear. I didn't. No, I said, I'm not signing. His hand twitched like thunder gathering. Barbara hissed. Ungrateful. We gave you everything. Everything? My laugh was small, sharp. You gave me bruises and debt. You gave me rules and a leash. You took my dignity. Dad slammed the table. Silver rattled hard. You're nothing without us. I have records, I said. Breath even. Transfers, dates, your handwriting, all of it. Silence spread like ice. For once, they blinked first. I slid the paper back. Try this again, and I pressed charges. Barbara paled to porcelain. Dad's fury flickered to calculation. I went upstairs. Locked the door. Packed the bag I'd packed in my head. Phone, documents, a sweater. The copy of the bank report. Across the street, Ellen's lamp glowed. I texted, "Can I come now?" Reply, "Door's open, hurry." I slipped out the back. November air cut clean and cold. Every breath tasted like decision. Ellen met me in her kitchen. "Tea's on," she said, eyes kind. "I have something," she added. A slim black recorder, edges scuffed. "I overheard them last month," she said. Window open, voices sharp, I recorded it. She pressed play. Dad's voice filled the room. "If she finds the 75 grand, we're finished." Barbara, low and slicing. "She won't. She's too weak to check." The words burned and soothed. Poison and antidote together. Ellen set down a second device. Security cam faces your driveway. A time-stamped clip, Dad shoving me. Barbara screaming. Dates, images, proof. My chest loosened, then ached harder. Grief making room for courage. "Harper," Ellen said, squeezing my hand. "You can end this. You're not alone." My phone buzzed. Jonathan again. "Are you safe? Tell me where." I typed, "Ellen's, I'm okay." Then added, "I'm done being afraid." "You'll need a lawyer," Ellen said softly. "And a clean paper trail." "Stephen's records," I answered. "Your recordings, everything." We stacked the evidence between our cups, building a spine I could borrow. Home wasn't behind me anymore. It was something I'd build next. Brick by brick, boundary by boundary, starting here, starting now. And when we moved, the town listened. Morning hit sharp and bright. I didn't go home. I moved. Ellen drove. I clutched the file. Bank records, audio, video, names. First stop, the station. Officer Ruiz took my statement, steady, exact. "Assault, coercion, financial fraud," she repeated. "Do you want a protective order?" "Yes," I said, certain now. "I'm not safe around them." She photographed the fading bruise, logged Ellen's clips, copied Stephen's folder. "We'll contact the DA today," Ruiz said. "You did the right thing, Harper." Second stop, Stephen's office. Affidavits notarized. Transfers mapped. "Your father left a trail," he said. "Same IP, same hours, same hands." Third stop, the courthouse. Jonathan waited on the steps. Tie crooked, eyes steady. "You're not alone," he said. The clerk stamped our petition. Temporary order. Hearing Friday. Service by tonight, she added. Stay with a friend. Richard Moore texted at noon. "I've seen enough. Hold the story." "After the hearing," I replied. "Then publish everything." By 3, unknown numbers swarmed. Barbara. Dad. Barbara again. Blocked. Silence on purpose. At 4, a deputy knocked. Papers served across Ellen's porch. "You've got courage," he said. I rehearsed, breathed, rehearsed again. What if the judge believes them? "Then we appeal," Ellen said. "What if he shows up drunk?" "Then we document," Jonathan answered. "What if I freeze?" "You won't," he said. Friday arrived in a shiver. Dad sat at defense, jaw locked. Barbara hovered behind, small, furious. Their lawyer smiled like glass. "Dunn versus Dunn," the clerk called. "Show me why," Judge Lane said. Miss Grant rose beside me. Exhibit A, she said, bank activity. 75,000. Dates, routes, timestamps. Exhibit B, she said, audio. Dad, if she finds it, we're finished. Barbara. She won't, too weak to check. Silence convicted better than speeches. Exhibit C, she continued, security footage. A shove. My stagger. Time stamped. Dad's lawyer tried family dispute. Miss Grant cut him clean. Fraud and assault, Your Honor. Do you fear future harm? Yes, I answered, retaliation. And the funds? They're mine. Documented where? The judge asked. Silence. A stammer. Denied, the judge said. Order extended, no contact. The financials go to the DA. The gavel landed like thunder. Outside, microphones bloomed. Richard waited. Tell it straight? I nodded. Headline posted at sunset. Image cracked. Sponsors called. At Ellen's, we didn't celebrate. We exhaled and planned. Restitution, civil claim, freezes, Miss Grant said. Jonathan set deadlines. Ellen labeled folders. Their steadiness steadied me. I wrote one line. I am not what they said I was. Tomorrow we take the rest back. I won in court. But the real win was quieter. It was breakfast without fear. A lock that only answered me. It was naming harm. Then choosing repair over revenge. I learned this truth. Silence protects abusers, never survivors. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you control. Love without respect corrodes. Respect without love still protects. Family is a verb, measured by care, not titles. Help wears ordinary faces. A neighbor, a clerk, a friend. Paper trails matter. So do bruises you can't photograph. Document, then decide. Decide, then act. Ask for help loudly. Safety likes witnesses. You can leave gradually. Leaving still counts. You can shake in court. Courage still counts. You can miss them sometimes. Healing still counts. Here's what kept me standing. Name what happened precisely. Abuse hates precise language. Save everything. Screenshots, statements, dates, receipts. Tell one safe person. Let truth have company. See a professional if possible. Your mind deserves care. Plan small exits. Cache, copies, keys, passwords. Expect pushback. Prepare scripts, not apologies. Measure progress in breaths, not milestones and headlines. Celebrate the unremarkable. Quiet mail, undisturbed sleep, soft mornings. Forgive yourself first, or simply stop blaming yourself. If you stay, let it be a choice. If you go, let it be a beginning. I am not what they said. I am what I choose. I choose repair. I choose boundaries. I choose me. To anyone listening in the dark, your voice is enough to start. To anyone counting reasons to stay, one reason to leave is enough. To anyone already walking, keep going. The road steadies. If you've been through this, you're not alone. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. If tonight is heavy, borrow my sentence. I am not what they said I was. Let tomorrow answer the rest.
The house smelled like vanilla and rose water. I'd spent hours perfecting the frosting. Each delicate swirl on the anniversary cake piped with the same care I used to give my wedding clients back when Wild Grace Blooms was still mine. The cake sat proudly on the dessert table, a soft pink centerpiece beneath a glittering 40 years topper. The dining room buzzed with warmth neighbors, old friends, relatives I hadn't seen since high school. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loud. My mother's prized china, pulled from the cabinet once a decade, gleamed under the chandelier. I took my seat, still brushing powdered sugar from my hands. Mom sat across from me in her silk blouse, hair curled just right. She lifted her wine glass and tapped it with a spoon. The room fell quiet. To 40 years of love, she said, and the grace to know when to let things go. At first, I thought it was poetic, until she turned to me. You're a burden, Calandra, she said. We want to live without you. My breath caught. I thought I'd misheard her, but the words were still echoing, hanging in the air like smoke. I turned to Dad. He didn't flinch, just took another sip of wine. Chairs creaked, forks paused midair. Diane from next door lowered her gaze. No one spoke, not even my sister. I smiled. I don't know why. Reflex. Maybe. I lifted my glass, sipped, and let the burn settle behind my ribs. Then I stood, smoothing the napkin across my lap. and walked away. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. Upstairs, I pulled my suitcase from the closet, packed slowly, essentials only, some clothes, my laptop, 3 framed photos from my nightstand. The house was hushed as I slipped out the side door and into the night. I didn't know where I was going, only that I was done pretending I was wanted. By morning, I was 10 miles away in a motel room with a flickering hallway light and a stiff pillow that smelled like bleach. I lay on top of the covers, watching the shadows shift on the ceiling, and let myself feel everything I hadn't let show at the table. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. Tomorrow, I'd begin to understand just how much they depended on the person they had so easily cast aside. I woke before the sun, stiff from the motel mattress and still dressed in the same blouse from dinner. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful, it was hollow, a kind of quiet that made you aware of your own breathing. I sat up slowly, legs dangling over the edge of the bed, and stared at the carpet. I'd known this day was coming. I just hadn't expected it to arrive so loudly, in front of a room full of people, 5 years ago. I'd walked away from something I loved. Wild Grace Blooms was never a booming business, but it was mine. Every petal, every invoice, every late-night wedding arrangement. My hands built it. When the call came, Mom's voice had trembled medical bills, repairs, late mortgage notices piling up. She said they were drowning. I didn't hesitate. I sold the shop for $132,000. I didn't even try to negotiate. Just handed the keys to a young couple who wanted to add a modern twist to my rustic displays. Then I moved back into my childhood bedroom, promising myself it was temporary. But temporary stretched into years. I got a job at a nursery half the pay, none of the pride, but it kept the money flowing, and the money never stopped flowing. Every month, and not once. Not once did they sit me down and say, "We see what you're doing. Thank you." Instead, they told me I was a burden, back at the motel. I opened my laptop. I needed to see the numbers, needed to feel them stacked in rows and columns. Unarguable. I scrolled through the auto payments. My account had been their lifeline, and I hadn't even realized how deeply. My fingers hovered over the cancellation tabs. Not yet, but soon. I closed the screen, leaned back in the creaking motel chair, and stared at the ceiling. They said they wanted to live without me. Maybe it was time to show them what that actually looked like. I opened the spreadsheet I'd started keeping 2 years ago, not out of bitterness, but to make sure nothing slipped through the cracks. Utilities consistent. $300 a month, give or take. Water usually $120. The internet and streaming bundles $83. The mortgage $1,000 even. Property taxes every quarter. Insurance twice a year. Groceries were harder to track. I'd swipe my card whenever the fridge looked empty or when Mom added things to the list and left it on the counter like an expectation. Repairs came in waves, plumbing leaks, an aging HVAC replacing the back steps. I tallied up the last 12 months alone over $22,000. Quietly, automatically withdrawn from the life I had put on pause. I used to think it was love, or maybe obligation. But sitting in this cheap motel chair with my laptop humming and my back aching, it looked like something else. I remembered the way Mom would introduce me at church. "This is Calandra, our oldest. She's staying with us for a bit while she figures things out." I remembered the way Dad never asked about work, how he'd glance up from his lawnmower repairs in the garage when I came home, but never said much beyond. Dinners on the stove. And Mara, my sister, once said during breakfast, "It's not like you have a real job anyway." I had laughed it off, but I didn't forget. It hadn't started this way. The first few months back in that house. There were signs of appreciation. Mom made me tea some nights. Dad fixed my old car. But eventually, they stopped noticing what I gave and only saw me as someone who stayed. And I stayed. Longer than I should have. I kept telling myself I was preserving something. The house. Their dignity. Our family. But all I'd really done was exchange my independence for their comfort. I closed the spreadsheet, then reopened it. My cursor hovered over the autopay settings tab again. Maybe the only way to reclaim my future was to stop financing theirs. Hadley opened the door before I even knocked. Her face was soft with concern, her voice low when she said, "Come in." "Honey," as if any louder might make me break. Their living room hadn't changed since the last time I was here. Warm wood floors, mismatched throw pillows, a crooked painting from a craft fair that Hadley swore was charm. Not a flaw. It felt lived in, real. The kind of space where you didn't have to be anyone but tired and honest. Marcus appeared from the kitchen with a mug of tea already in hand. The way people do when they know you well enough not to ask first. I sank into the couch and didn't speak for a long time. When I finally did, I told them everything. Not just the dinner, though I did tell them that. Every word but the years leading up to it. The shop I gave up, the payments I made, the slow disappearance of gratitude, the weight of always being needed, never wanted. Hadley didn't interrupt. She just placed a hand on my arm and squeezed. Marcus sat across from me, legs crossed, brow furrowed, silent until I finished. Then he said, "You ever hear about what happened with Ezra?" Vance Ezra had been an acquaintance from our early business days, owned a lawn care company, and took care of his family for nearly a decade, paid for everything. Then, one day, his daughter told him he was controlling, said he was in the way. So he walked, turned off every financial tap. Within 2 months, the house was repossessed, the car gone, the daughter living in a one-bedroom across town. He didn't do it to punish her. Marcus said, he just stopped letting her write checks with someone else's account. I stared into my tea, the steam fading. That night, alone in their guest room, I opened my laptop again. My fingers didn't tremble this time. Electricity cancel, water cancel, internet cancel, streaming, insurance, online grocery account. The digital umbilical cord severed, thread by thread. Each click was a quiet goodbye. A sentence they never let me say aloud. I didn't feel angry, just clear. They said they wanted to live without me. Now they could. I closed the lid, exhaled slowly, and finally lay back in a bed that wasn't mine, but for the first time in years, didn't feel like it cost me everything to stay in. I woke to sunlight slanting through the guest room blinds and the faint clink of dishes in the kitchen. For a moment, I let myself pretend it was a regular morning, one where I hadn't been called a burden, hadn't walked out, hadn't spent the night untangling years of obligation with a few careful keystrokes. Then I reached for my phone. 17 missed calls, all from Mom, 2 voicemails, 1 text. "Call me now." I stared at the screen without opening a single one. 10 minutes later, it rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I didn't need to. I answered without speaking. "What the hell did you do?" Mara's voice was sharp, frantic. "The internet's down. I have client submissions due today. The power's flickering. Mom's freaking out." I kept my voice calm. I stopped paying. There was a pause. Then she scoffed. "What is wrong with you? You can't just pull the plug on everything without warning." "I wasn't warned when I was called a burden," I said. "That was," she faltered. "That was just Mom. She was emotional. You know how she gets." "And, Dad," silence. I waited. "You're being dramatic," she said finally. "Look, just flip everything back on." "Okay, we'll talk later." "No." Another pause. "This one colder." Mara snapped. "This is exactly why no one wants to deal with you. You always make everything about yourself." I didn't answer. I just ended the call. Hadley walked in a few minutes later, holding a plate of toast and a soft look I didn't deserve but appreciated anyway. I didn't tell her what Mara said. I didn't need to. The phone was still buzzing on the nightstand, a steady reminder of the chaos I'd left behind. By noon, the calls had slowed, but the silence felt heavier. No apology came, not from Mom, not from Dad, just panic and blame, like I'd stolen something instead of simply stepping away. The weight in my chest wasn't anger, it was recognition. That may be all this time. I hadn't been loved for who I was, but for what I provided. Later that afternoon, the messages changed tone. One from Mom read the water's off. I don't know what's happening. Please call me. Still no mention of what was said at dinner. No acknowledgement. Just logistics. Crisis. Expectation. I powered the phone off. That evening, Marcus grilled vegetables in the backyard while Hadley poured us glasses of sweet tea. The air was still warm, the light just starting to shift. I sat between them, quiet. My hands wrapped around the glass, watching the smoke rise from the grill. They didn't ask me for anything. They didn't pretend to understand everything. They just let me exist. It was the first time in years I felt like I could, and tomorrow, I knew the unraveling would begin. It didn't take long for word to spread. Birmingham was big enough to disappear in. But the neighborhood wasn't. Hadley heard from a coworker who'd heard from her cousin that the Wynn family was behind on their mortgage. Diane from 2 doors down had apparently stopped by with store-bought muffins and left with a tight-lipped story about the utilities being out for 3 days straight. And Mara, my sister, who once posted about freedom in freelancing, was now working night shifts at a 24-hour supermarket off Lakeshore. Someone Hadley knew had seen her shelving canned goods in the fluorescent half-light. She hadn't looked up. I didn't feel vindicated. Just tired. Thomas texted me that morning, asking if I was okay. I told him I was... mostly. He replied with a simple "proud of you." That was enough. Late that afternoon, there was a knock on Hadley's door. I knew who it was before she opened it. Mom stood in the doorway, clutching her purse like it might run away. She looked smaller somehow. Not older, just collapsed inward. "Can we talk?" she asked. Hadley glanced at me, and I gave her a slight nod. Mom sat stiff on the edge of the guest room couch. I didn't move from the armchair. She started with small things. The fridge, the heating, the plants dying without the humidifier I used to refill. Then her voice cracked. "Calandra, sweetheart, we're trying, but it's too much." I let her speak. I waited. Finally, I said, "You told me you wanted to live without me." She flinched. "I didn't mean, but you said it. And you said it in front of people who still haven't reached out to ask if I'm okay." Tears welled in her eyes. "We need help." I nodded slowly. "Then it's time Mara and Dad figure out how to help you." I did my part, for 5 years. She didn't argue. She just sat for a moment longer, then stood, nodded tightly, and walked out. I watched the door close and felt something settle in me, not revenge. Just release. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about choosing myself. A week passed before I heard from them again. Not directly from my father, of course. He never called, never had, not even when I first moved out at 19. But he sent a message through Mom, scribbled in his square handwriting on the back of a gardening flyer she left in Hadley's mailbox. "Think about what family means." I read it twice, 3 times, then folded it neatly and tucked it into the bottom of my tote bag without a word. Later that day, Mom called again. I let it go to voicemail. Her tone was softer this time, practiced, measured. "We just wanted space." "Calandra, not to lose you. That night, we were overwhelmed. Your father was tired. I didn't mean for it to come out that way, but it had come out that way, and not one person at that table had stopped it. Not even her." I called her back that evening. She answered on the second ring. "You said you wanted to live without me," I said quietly. "We were emotional." She insisted. "We thought maybe it was time you found your own way. It wasn't about not appreciating you." "But that's exactly what it was about." I said, "You didn't want to feel dependent on me, so you decided to erase what I'd done instead." She was quiet for a long time. "We miss you," she said finally. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Then you should have said something different at the dinner table." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up and turned off my phone again. I had no interest in dragging myself back into a version of home where I was only valuable when invisible. Let them sit in the space they'd asked for. I wasn't going to rescue anyone from a silence they created. 3 months passed in quiet, steady separation. I didn't call, I didn't ask for updates, but news, like weeds, finds a way to grow. Diane from across the street sent me a photo one morning, no caption. Just an image of the old house with a crooked for sale sign stuck in the patchy front lawn. The grass had yellowed, the shutters were peeling, and the flower beds I once tended had been swallowed by weeds. I stared at the picture for a long time, not with satisfaction, not even sadness, just distance, like looking at a past life you no longer recognize as your own. They sold it 2 weeks later. Hadley told me the details in a whisper, as if speaking louder might make it feel real. The buyers were a couple from out of state. The price was low, far lower than it should have been, but the mortgage had fallen too far behind to wait for a better offer. Mom, Dad, and Mara moved into a rental on the far edge of the city, a 1-bedroom apartment above a consignment store. No backyard, no garage, no garden. I didn't visit, not out of spite. I just had no business going back. The house I grew up in had stopped being mine long before I walked out the side door that night. I was just the one who paid to keep it standing. Now, someone else would be walking through those rooms, repainting the walls, tearing out the old carpet. I hoped they wouldn't find the ledger of sacrifice buried beneath the foundation, because that story, my story, had finally ended, and I wasn't going to write another chapter in a house that had never truly made room for the woman I became. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, and unmarked except for my name in neat handwriting I hadn't seen in a while. Mara. I let it sit on the counter for hours. I made tea, rearranged the books on the shelf, wiped down a table that wasn't dusty. Still. It waited. Still. I opened it. It was 2 pages, carefully written, carefully vague. She said she was sorry, said things had gotten out of hand, that she'd been stressed, overwhelmed. She mentioned the house sale, the move, how difficult it had all been. There was a line about missing the way things used to be, and a hope that maybe, one day, we could talk. But nowhere in those pages was the word grateful. Nowhere was the sentence, "You didn't deserve that." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer with other things I no longer needed but couldn't quite throw away. I didn't write back. By then. I was in my own space, a modest condo in Eastwood with a narrow balcony and just enough room for peace. I worked part-time for a floral studio downtown, helping design wedding arrangements, teaching bouquet workshops to brides and kids and people who just liked color. I was building something again, not a business, not a legacy, just a quiet life that didn't require anyone else's permission to feel like mine. The phone rang sometimes, unknown numbers, voicemails that started with long pauses. I didn't pick up. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't opening a door that had only ever swung one way. And when I turned off the lamp each night, I did so without worrying who was still waiting in the dark. The walls of my condo are slowly filling with color flower sketches I've drawn on slow afternoons. Some framed, some taped with no particular plan. Peonies, lilies, daisies in motion, not for sale, not for display. Just for me. Each morning, I step onto the small balcony with my watering can. The planters are full now. Mint, rosemary, wildflowers, a stubborn ivy I nearly gave up on. The scent rises with the heat, soft and green. Sometimes I catch myself humming. My bank account isn't full, but it's mine. Every paycheck comes from work I choose, and every bill is one I signed up for. No one's name rides beside mine anymore. I no longer wake up checking for overdue notices. I no longer brace for the weight of someone else's silence. One evening, as the sky turned lavender, I stood barefoot on the balcony, Jose draped over my arm, mist catching the last bit of light, and I whispered it aloud just once. Just for me. I was never the burden. I was the builder. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. Inside. My phone rested on the table. No buzzing, no pleading, just stillness. And I let it stay that way, turning back to the vines curling toward the railing, roots clinging tight, growing where they were finally allowed to stay. The table was dressed in white linen and lit with flickering candles, all arranged beneath the low canopy of magnolia branches that arched over my parents' garden. It was their 40th anniversary, and everything was curated down to the antique silver and the jazz trio playing softly by the fountain. I sat near the end of the table, same as always, just close enough to refill the wine, just far enough to be forgotten. Sylvie had already regaled the table with 3 stories, each one louder and more self-congratulatory than the last. Her boutique had been featured in a local lifestyle magazine. A musician had stopped by. A model wore one of her custom silk wraps on Instagram. Dad beamed. Mom nodded along, her smile stretched thin with effort. When dessert was served, some peach tart her assistant had picked up from a bakery I used to pay invoices for, Sylvie leaned forward and said it. "How does it feel?" she asked, raising her glass just high enough to make sure everyone was watching, being the most useless one here. A small ripple of laughter moved through the table like spilled champagne, quiet, sticky, and impossible to ignore. Dad's chuckle was deep and unbothered. Mom gave one of those closed-mouth smiles she uses when she doesn't want to seem complicit, but doesn't plan to object either. Sylvie's husband smirked as if he'd heard the joke before. He probably had. I didn't look down. I didn't laugh. I just folded my hands in my lap, then placed them carefully on the table. My voice didn't rise above the music, but it cut through the evening like a cello string snapping. "How does it feel?" I asked, keeping my eyes steady on Sylvie, knowing the useless one won't be paying your bills anymore. The silence was immediate. Forks froze mid-air. Someone coughed. Sylvie's smirk broke, faltered, disappeared. I stood up slowly. The legs of my chair scraped sharply against the stone patio. No one stopped me. No one spoke. I turned toward the garden gate, the air thick behind me. I didn't wait for them to call after me. I knew they wouldn't. I walked past the fountain, past the flickering lights and polished silver, and into the dark street beyond. My heels clicked against the bricks as I made my way home, each step steadier than the last. They didn't know it yet, but everything had already changed. I was 14 when I heard the panic in my mother's voice behind the kitchen door. It was the first time I understood money could hum like a warning in the walls of our house. Dad had lost a major client and the mortgage was due. I had been working at Bellamy Books on weekends, shelving paperbacks and straightening display tables for $7 an hour. That night, I counted every dollar I had saved, $800 in total, and slipped the envelope onto my father's desk. He didn't say thank you. He called me reliable. The next month, Sylvie got a new convertible for her 18th birthday, a red one with a custom plate and white leather seats. The kind of car that turns heads even in Charleston's tourist traffic. She squealed when she saw it. My parents beamed. No one mentioned the envelope I'd left behind. By 17, I was taking extra shifts at a downtown cafe covering for students who needed weekends off. I gave Dad $500 for new drafting tools when he said his old set was barely holding together. He patted my head like I was the dog, then told Mom I was a walking trust fund. At 19, I was offered a partial scholarship to study art history in Florence. It was the first thing I'd wanted just for myself. I remember sitting on the back steps with the acceptance letter, rereading the words until they blurred. But Sylvie was behind on tuition again, something about unpaid fees and an apartment too expensive for her part-time gallery job. Dad sat me down in his office. "Family helps family, Corinne," he said, with that heavy gaze he used to close a conversation before it began. I didn't fight. I transferred the $5,000 I had saved for Italy into an account linked to Sylvie's school. She graduated a year later with honors and a portfolio my parents framed. I graduated from a local state school, balancing night classes with 2 jobs. At Sylvie's wedding, I paid the deposit on the reception venue. When she opened her boutique Juniper and Silk, I co-signed the loan and never saw the paperwork again. They called me helpful, practical, steady, but never by my name, and certainly never with thanks. It was a Tuesday night, late enough that I'd already shut my laptop and brewed tea. I was in bed with a half-read book when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Sylvie's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Corinne." "Hey," she said, voice bright like we'd just spoken that morning. "I need a favor." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "The boutique is doing great, really it is, but there's this space next door I want to expand into. The bank's offering a line of credit, but they want a cosigner. Just $75,000. It's nothing really. You're good with numbers. Can you help me make it happen?" She said it like she was asking for a ride to the airport. I sat up. $75,000 isn't nothing, Sylvie. "Oh, come on," she laughed lightly. "You sit in that little apartment writing grant proposals all day. You've got investments. You don't even have kids or a mortgage. It's not like you're curing cancer." My throat tightened. "No," I said. There was a pause. "No. As in you won't help me." "No, as in I won't co-sign a $75,000 loan for someone who hasn't repaid me for anything." The lightness vanished from her voice. "You're being selfish." The word dropped like a match. I didn't argue. I ended the call. After the silence returned, I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I clicked through folders until I reached the one I'd named quietly without thinking. Records. It was locked. I typed in the password. Receipts, bank transfers, tax documents, tuition payments, business account top-ups, all traced back to me. I had scanned and saved every one year after year. At the bottom was a contract signed and notarized dated March 2015. I stared at the final line. Ownership stake 51%, Corinne Mallory. She had cried the night she signed it, overwhelmed and desperate. The business was collapsing. I had liquidated nearly everything I had to keep her afloat. She signed without reading. I never reminded her. She didn't remember what she gave me. But I had never forgotten. The silence after my question didn't break. It buckled. I watched it fracture in their eyes one by one. Sylvie blinked rapidly, her expression contorting like she couldn't decide whether to be offended or confused. My mother's hand hovered midair, still holding her wine glass. My father cleared his throat, but the sound had no weight. No one moved. I didn't sit back down. Instead, I took one step forward, my voice quiet but clear. "You want to know how I feel?" I asked. "Let me tell you." I turned my gaze on Sylvie first. "The tuition you couldn't cover at St. Martin's, that was me. The boutique's lease when your rent check bounced during lockdown, me again. Payroll for your staff for 3 consecutive quarters, all covered. I looked at my parents. The down payment on your new roof. The orthodontist. The catered reception for Sylvie's wedding. I signed every check. I filled every gap." Sylvie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I kept quiet because I thought that's what family did. I said, I thought being useful was the same as being loved. I thought if I worked hard enough, gave enough, I'd earn a seat at this table. My mother looked down. My father finally spoke. "That's enough, Corinne." I shook my head. "It's not even close." I reached into my bag and placed a manila folder on the table. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Inside are documents proving I've funded over $120,000 in expenses for this family since I was 16, including the contract that makes me majority owner of Juniper and Silk. Sylvie jolted upright. "You're lying." I looked at her. "You signed it. You were crying on the phone, remember March 2015. I saved your business. You just forgot I was there." My father stood up, his jaw tight. "You're humiliating your sister in front of everyone." "No," I said, gathering my voice one final time. "I'm done hiding what you chose not to see." I turned toward the gate. The candlelight behind me flickered restless. No one followed. No one called my name. By the time I reached the street, the air felt cooler, and for the first time, the weight wasn't mine. The morning after the dinner, I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the scheduled transfer $2,500 withdrawn from my savings account on the first of every month like clockwork. It had started quietly back when Sylvie's boutique was barely covering utilities. I hadn't told her about it. She just assumed things had resolved on their own. I tapped Cancel Transfer. A pop-up appeared. "Are you sure?" I clicked Yes. By the end of that week, the fallout arrived. First, it was a string of texts from Sylvie. Landlord called. Rent bounced. "What's going on? Suppliers are freaking out. Are you late on something?" Then the calls. Then the voicemails. each one more frantic than the last. By Friday night, I stopped checking my phone entirely. Saturday morning, the buzzer rang. I walked to the intercom already knowing whose voice would be waiting on the other end. Corinne Sylvie snapped, "Open the door." My father's voice followed lower, but edged with command. "We're not here to fight. We just need to talk." I buzzed them in. They entered like they still owned the place. Sylvie stormed past me into the living room, arms crossed. My father followed slower, his eyes scanning the space like he was looking for something to be disappointed in. "You cut me off," Sylvie said. "The boutique is a mess. My suppliers are threatening legal action. My landlord wants 2 months' rent immediately. You can't just—" "I did," I said, "and I won't be restarting it." "You don't get to just decide that," she snapped. "Not when we're this far in." "I've been deciding it for years," I replied, walking calmly to the side table where I kept the folder. "You just never noticed." I laid the leather-bound portfolio on the coffee table and opened it. Receipts, wire transfers, the loan agreement for the boutique, bank records, emails with her vendors, the contract with my 51% ownership notarized and dated. "Everything you've built," I said, turning the pages slowly, "has been quietly scaffolded by me. You can call me selfish, dramatic, whatever you want, but I'm done." My father leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing at the contract. "This isn't how family works, Corinne," he said. "We don't keep score." "No," I replied. "You just don't like when the math is out loud." They didn't speak for a moment. Then Sylvie grabbed the folder, scanning the pages like she was seeing my name for the first time. Her hands trembled, but she said nothing. "You wanted me to fix it," I said, folding my arms. "I just did." My father's voice sharpened as he stepped between me and the coffee table. "This ends now," he said. "You'll reinstate the payment. We can't afford this chaos, Corinne. You have the means. You will help your sister." He spoke like I was a child again, as if the years hadn't passed, as if I hadn't funded their peace for over a decade. As if obligation was my default setting. "I already have," I said, steady. "I helped when Sylvie was crying to me night after night, when she thought her boutique was finished, when creditors were circling and she couldn't make payroll. I liquidated my investment portfolio. $60,000, my entire cushion." He blinked. Sylvie's head jerked back. "You never said that she spat." "You didn't tell me. You didn't ask," I said. She turned to my father, eyes wide. "I thought it was a short-term loan. You signed a contract," I said. "You were desperate. I saved the business, Sylvie. And then I disappeared so you could pretend it was all you." Her jaw clenched. "You didn't have to humiliate me. You didn't have to bring it up in front of everyone. I brought up the truth. You brought the humiliation the second you called me useless." My father raised his voice. "This isn't about feelings. This is about unity, about protecting the family." "No," I said, stepping closer. "This is about power. You don't get to mock the person keeping the lights on. You don't get to call her selfish when she stops letting herself be drained." Sylvie laughed, bitter and brittle. "So this is revenge, some pathetic play for control?" "No," I said softly. "This is reclamation. For years I kept you afloat and let you pretend I didn't exist. I let you treat me like I owed you the air you breathe. But I don't. Not anymore." My father shook his head. "You're tearing this family apart." "I've been holding it together," I said. Quietly, invisibly. "You only noticed me when I said no." Sylvie clutched the portfolio to her chest. Her silence was louder than her shouting ever was. When they left, I didn't follow them out. I closed the door gently behind them and stood there for a long moment, hand still on the knob. My voice had finally landed, and I knew exactly where it would echo next. The manila envelope arrived on a rainy morning, heavy in my mailbox, like it already knew what it carried. Inside was a lawsuit. Sylvie was suing me, claiming I had coerced her into signing over the boutique during a time of emotional vulnerability. Her attorney used phrases like undue influence and breach of trust. I didn't panic. I called Laura, who gave me the name of a lawyer she trusted, Margot Shaw. Margot reviewed everything: my documents, the email chains, the wire transfers, the notarized contract. She didn't flinch. "This isn't a lawsuit," she said, flipping the last page. "It's a warning shot, and it won't land." The hearing came quickly. Sylvie showed up, polished lips pressed tight. My father sat beside her, arms folded, jaw locked. They didn't look at me. Her lawyer painted me as controlling, calculating. Said I preyed on her desperation in 2015. Claimed I used business as leverage against family. Then Margot stood. She didn't embellish. She showed them what I'd done, $60,000 wired from my account, debt negotiated, landlord appeased, payroll saved, all documented, all signed. This wasn't exploitation, she said. It was survival. And my client made it possible. The judge looked unimpressed with the theatrics. Motion to dismiss is granted. Just like that. Outside, the air was warm. Margot told me I was free. But walking to my car, I realized something quieter had ended too. Not just the case, but the part of me that still expected them to care. After the judge's gavel fell, the silence came quickly. No one called. No one wrote. My mother didn't even send her usual vague holiday card with a photo of the garden. For the first time in my adult life, I was entirely unaccounted for in my family's world. I thought it might hurt more. Instead, it felt like walking into a room I didn't realize I'd been locked out of. The absence didn't ache, it clarified. With the legal mess behind me, I returned to the easel I had pulled out weeks earlier. I bought better brushes. I mixed color without rushing. It didn't matter what I painted, landscapes, unfinished portraits, sometimes just layers of red on top of green. It wasn't about creating something good. It was about feeling my hands do something that wasn't for anyone else. One morning, an email came from a woman I'd met years ago through a nonprofit grant. She was helping organize a regional women's leadership conference. The theme was Resilience Rebuilding Without Permission. She said they wanted someone who could speak to setting boundaries with grace. Someone who had walked away from something that had once defined her. They wanted me. I sat with the invitation for 2 days before responding. Then I wrote back, yes, I'll do it. And for the first time in a long time, I let my voice rise above the quiet. My birthday came on a Tuesday, quiet and unceremonious. I took the day off work, wandered the cobbled streets near the waterfront, and bought myself a slice of lemon cake from a bakery that didn't ask questions. No one called. No one from the family, at least. That evening, as the sun slipped low behind the Spanish moss, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Thinking of you. I miss my girl. 7 words. I stared at the screen for a long time, the message hovering like a hand halfway extended. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acknowledgement. It was nostalgia, maybe. Or regret. Or an echo of something she once meant. Years ago, that message would have undone me. I would have taken it as a sign to soften, to reopen the doors I had just started to close. But not now. I set the phone back in my pocket without replying. The wind off the harbor was warm and clean. I passed the bookstore where I'd worked as a teenager, the one that smelled like old paper and lemon polish. The lights inside glowed gently through the windows, and for a second I saw myself shelving paperbacks in the back corner, quiet and visible, hopeful. But she wasn't me anymore. I kept walking. Past the shops, past the schoolhouse with its mural half-finished, past the wide porch of a house I used to imagine belonging to. The silence that followed me wasn't hollow this time. It was earned. The room was full of women, some in blazers, others in borrowed time. A soft murmur settled as I stepped behind the podium. The lights weren't harsh, but I could still feel the weight of being seen. I didn't bring notes. I just told the truth. For most of my life I believed value came from what you could carry for other people, their debts, their dreams, their disappointments. I became the helper, the planner, the one who showed up when everyone else looked away. I let the silence hold, but the greatest thing I ever gave, I said slowly, was finally giving myself permission to say no. I told them about the loan, the years of silent giving, the night at the dinner table when I said the one thing no one expected from me, the truth. I didn't name names. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about weight, and how good it felt to set it down. When I finished, the room was still. Then came applause, not loud, but real. A woman in the front row nodded with tears in her eyes. Another stood slowly like she was unfolding a truth inside herself. Afterward, they came to me with stories. Not about boutiques or money, but about boundaries and breaking points, about mothers' husbands, sisters' sons, about waking up. That night, I walked home under a sky wide with stars, my name tag still clipped to my blouse paint on my fingers from the canvas I'd worked on that morning. No more saving anyone from themselves. No more giving until I disappeared. I didn't become famous. I didn't become rich. But I became free. And maybe that was the most ambitious thing of all.